Setbacks are temporary, but comebacks, they are legendary. Welcome back to the PSI Effect, where we pause, shift, and ignite purpose that speaks louder than your past. This is Neug, and together with Franky, we're your hosts in this space, and your comeback starts now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the PSI Effect podcast. So glad to have you here with us at this episode that we're about to come at you with. And, for our seasoned listeners and also for our new listeners, we just want to, before we jump into it, want to invite you to go to your social spaces and like and subscribe, all of those things that social media allows you to do, so you can help push our algorithm up and have others find us and be able to come and join the space and be a part of the conversation. So we are really glad to have you here. I'm a little bit excited because it is, the March Madness season. We're recording this episode during March Madness season, and pretty excited about that, though I haven't been able to watch a whole lot of the games. But March Madness has just always been one of those spring activities that you could rely on, just to keep you entertained for a couple of good weeks. So hopefully I'll be able to catch a game or two before the end of the round. But what say you, Frankie? You've been getting into it a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. It's been kind of a damper on it for me because, I'm repping my Carolina team, with my shirt today, but they've been sitting at home for a little while now. They got eliminated early, and now we're looking for a new coach. So that's deflated my excitement about March Madness just a little bit, but there's some high level basketball being played, and I enjoy watching teams compete. I have a philosophy. I have two favorite teams, Carolina and whoever Duke is playing. Anybody but Duke. Anybody but Duke. We don't like the Dukies.
I have heard that before, and I'm sure you are not alone in that sentiment. Because that is a very, very strong rivalry. Although, there's a lot of really good rivalries, in states. And I know, like, I'm sporting the Michigan State shirt. I did not attend Michigan State. However, my older sister did, and I have a host of friends that went to Michigan State. I root for them.
Yeah.
Besides being, besides being from Michigan, so from the state of Michigan, I should say. So,
I got you. I think Big Blue Michigan, though, Big Blue Nation over there, whatever they refer to themselves as, Michigan. At least I have them in my bracket, being able to, cut down the nets at the end of the road here.
I didn't even fill out a bracket this year.
Man, you tripping?
I didn't. I had stuff on my plate, man. I did not even get there. It's all good, though. The whole thing for me is about the sport and watching the sport, so it's all good. So, what are we talking about? What we going to talk about today? We're talking about.
First off, I think there's an announcement we have to make.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is going to be the last episode of the PSI Effect podcast.
Uh-oh.
April Fools. Yeah, when this episode drops, it's going to be April 1st. So I'm pretty sure our listeners are going to be getting inundated with all sorts of shenanigans and April Fools type of activity. Of course, living in the U.S., you watch the regular news cycle, it seems like every day is April Fools, but I'm not going to go down that road on the podcast today. But no, we're gonna, with it being April Fool's News, I think it might be a good time for us to just talk about the notion of who's fooling who, and really being honest with ourselves and stop trying to fool ourselves about certain things as we're on our journey, as we're trying to pause, shift, and ignite to author our comeback. We got to be real with ourselves, and we got to stop fooling ourselves. So I think that's a good conversation for us to have today.
Authenticity is definitely good for one to start with themselves. Because if you're not authentic with yourself, then you really are not going to come off as authentic to anyone else. And I know we did an episode about wearing the mask, our Halloween episode.
Yep.
And so this one kind of plays into that a little bit. But I think this one is more about, really being true to yourself and authentic to yourself. So when when you look in the mirror, like who's looking back at you? And are you honest enough with yourself to um to really say who is looking back at you, right? We go through we go through life, and we ask ourselves questions about who we are and what we want and what we like and what we don't like and so forth. And I think sometimes we kind of get off track with that, or people can get off track with that and start to accept things that really aren't who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a slippery slope. It is definitely a slippery slope, and I'm looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into the conversation. But before we go too deep down that path, being that it's April Fools, talk to me, Nuge. What's been like the craziest April Fool's prank that you have been victim of, or the craziest prank that you have orchestrated against someone else?
Oh, it's probably been a while, Frankie, honestly, since I even participated in anything April Fools. I know the job I had, it was it was one of those things where you had to be politically correct, and you don't want to step on toes. So I didn't really participate in a lot of that. I know, growing up, we were always, especially our siblings, we would try to prank each other and try to prank my parents if we could. Um, but in the last many years, I haven't done anything like that, Frankie. Sad to say.
I mean, you're not by yourself in that, but you talk about pranking parents, boy, you rolling the dice, especially, how we were raised. You prank parents, and parents, you catch them the wrong day or whatever. Oof, you might catch a beating. But, kudos to you for being, brave enough, or should I say foolhardy enough, to try to prank parents. Cause yeah, that is not a road I would go down.
Well, there's that saying about being, young and dumb.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But I'm in the
What about
same boat
you?
with you. Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I haven't really done any, I don't like being lied to. I don't like being pranked. So by the same turn of that, I don't like doing those things to other people. So I really haven't done any April Fool stuff. I think the most recent thing that I ever did was just I joke with my two sons. We have a neighbor, we live in a rural area. We have a neighbor who has two horses, and that neighbor does not do a good job of keeping those horses contained, and they get out quite often, or they used to. So they would get out and they would come about half mile to a mile down the road from our neighbor to our house, to our yard, to eat our grass. My sons would always say, Dad, when you're putting that fertilizer and stuff out, that's like you're seasoning the grass and making the horses want to come down here to eat it. But whenever they visit,
they had to go to a different restaurant.
right, they're coming over here to the
Yeah.
buffet. But
Yeah.
whenever those horses would visit, they would not leave us empty-handed. They would leave lots of little brown gifts all over the yard for us. And
Extra fertilizer.
yeah, but it was my son's responsible to clean it up. And I pranked them. It was an April Fool's Day, and I was like, "Oh man, the horses are out here, and they've left poop all over the place out here in the yard." And you would have thought, I took away their favorite toy, or they lost their best friend or something, because those boys were upset because the last time they had to clean up the poop, it filled up a couple 5-gallon buckets worth. So
Oh my goodness.
they were getting that work in. But that's probably the extent of the April Fool's craziness I've messed with.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. I might have to think of something and try to prank a couple people this year, just because you put that thought in my head. You gave me the idea.
No, sir. No, don't you put that on me.
So let's talk about one of the easiest ways that you can probably prank someone today.
Okay.
And this is my opinion, or my, as the young kids would say, my POV, is AI. I mean,
Okay.
AI is just incredible with what it can do. And I know there's a lot of talk about some of the bad things that AI can do and suck folks into. But when you're thinking about pranks and April Fools and thinking about authenticity, I think about AI because we're living in this age where AI is prevalent all over the place. I mean, it's in businesses, it's in schools, it's in workplaces, it's in homes, it's everywhere. And being someone who has dabbled around in AI a little bit and worked on a few things, it is absolutely very easy, I think, to fool people now because AI has gotten so much better than it was even 6 months ago, 8 months ago. It's
Mhm.
gotten so much better. And it's really, really, before, there would be, you could create images or whatever and of a person and they'd have like 6 fingers or 7 fingers and, that kind of thing. And, they've really gotten better with that. And so I think that AI is one of those things that you could really fool people with. And so I think it just plays into the authenticity part of our conversation because if AI is such a big part of your life, I mean, are you really being authentic with yourself and are you really being authentic with others if you're using um, that source as a means to everything in your life today?
I think it depends on how you're using it though, right? I mean, if you're just using AI to help you do research and things like that, then I don't think that's intersecting with your authenticity. But if if we're out there using AI to generate content to help us portray a vision or portray an image of something we're not, then that's a whole different ballgame. I think that definitely crosses the line where, we're starting to fool ourselves just because we can generate all this evidence, generate all this content, whether it's, text stuff. There are people that are using AI to generate content so they can post it on LinkedIn to make it sound
Hmm.
like they're a high level executive or, whether it's, some podcasts are using AI to totally come up with all the ideas for what they're going to talk about. I mean,
Hmm.
there's lots of ways that AI can cross that line where you're sacrificing authenticity for convenience.
Yeah, I think about, recently I heard it was a podcast I was listening to, and the person on there said, yeah, I use AI to send my mom a message every morning. It's like, what?
Yikes.
So I mean, there are you're 100% correct. I mean, there are ways that you can use it, constructively,
Mhm.
and there are some harms that can come from it. But I mean, that's just one part of the whole authenticity piece that we're talking about today. It just kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about looking in the mirror and who you are. I mean, because you filter a lot of things in your day and in your life, right? There's a lot of filters that go into what happens, and can you go so far as to really change or alter who you really are through all of those different filters that you may have?
I mean, there are TV shows dedicated to this, right? There's what's the name of it? Catfish on MTV or something
Oh
like
yeah.
that, where people they spend an inordinate amount of time creating a false identity, impersonating being another person online, effectively. I mean, I think that takes it to the extreme, but what you referenced, the time that we spend curating our Instagram or curating our Facebook or LinkedIn, to put forth these snapshots of our days and snapshots of our lives. Again, we've referenced this before in previous episodes. Those are just small windows. It's not a full view of the whole thing. So
Yeah.
if we're spending all this time to have this carefully curated vision of who we are pushed out to the world, it becomes a problem when we start drinking our own Kool-Aid and think that that is the actual representation of who we are.
Yeah, and I think it what you just mentioned, I think what could help us is we talk about the accountability partners. We talk about that a lot. And, having that accountability partner can help you stay somewhat focused on, what's real, I guess, in your life. And, we have this thing that we like to say to people, or this phrase that we like to say, that we're fine. how are you doing? I'm fine. And,
Mm-hmm.
you could be really having a difficult time, especially if you're stuck, right? If you're in a stagnant place, are you really fine? Um, well, we can start to believe that when we say it long enough. I guess you could believe anything if you say it long enough. If we don't have someone that we can, talk to, bounce thoughts off of, and help us keep it real, especially during those times when, things may be not going as well as we think they may, or we think that they should be going. I'm fine is a real easy answer or a real easy way to sidestep conversations and situations with people. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but part of the pause, shift, and ignite that we talk about is taking a beat and recognizing that maybe you're not. Right? And I think that accountability partners is the piece that can help you with that. Accountability partner, relationship partner, good family member, somebody that can step in and help you talk through some things if you need to talk through 'em. But I think that we use that "I'm fine" as a crutch a lot of times, just because whether we don't want to be bothered or what have you, we don't want to share, we don't want to be vulnerable to the folks around us about what's happening.
Yeah, and I don't think we're using it as a crutch. I see it as more of a shield that we hide behind.
Okay,
Um,
that's good.
the exactly like you described, though, to avoid getting into conversations that may be difficult, to avoid having to acknowledge and express to someone else the difficulties that we may be having, the setbacks that we may be facing. So, I mean, it's not always a bad thing to say, I'm fine. You may not trust that person that you're engaging with enough to be that vulnerable with them, because what you're talking about, just like you mentioned, is being willing to be vulnerable enough to engage in a real conversation. And you use the term that pricked my ear, being real. Uh, that term has been around for a long time. What does being real look like and mean to you, Nuge?
Well, for me, it's being my authentic self. I am being real, being honest with myself, uh, being who I am, not sacrificing my beliefs or my values because other people may not necessarily agree or may not necessarily like them. Just being that true, being true to Nuge, right? Being true to Nuge, and just living my life that way, and not shutting myself down just to appease other people, and doing those things that make me feel good, that make me happy, make me feel fulfilled, help me to be my best self, right? That's what being real is. And it's, to me, being real is all about you. It's kind of a selfish uh aspect, being real when I look at it from an individual standpoint. um so you're just not sacrificing yourself, um just to get along, or just to appease others, or I'm not saying that you don't support others who are having difficulty. I'm not saying that you don't necessarily um, take somewhat of a backseat if you're trying to lift somebody up. But at the same time, I think you have to always be very true to who you are and your beliefs, because I'm not going to try to help somebody or lift them up if it's outside of my belief system. I think that there's situations that come up that would challenge that. Um, but I just think at the end of the day, one has to be true to the core, um, and believe enough in those values to be real with themselves.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I sum it up simply by saying being real is just being who you are when there's nobody else around, right? Because
Yeah.
any facade that we put up, any mask that we put on, any filter that we curate our expression through only brings value when the other people are involved. If we're by ourselves, there is absolutely no need for any of that. So being real is being exactly who you are as if nobody was around. I've heard the
Yeah, I like how you
expression.
took what I said and you just put it in that nice little neat box, Frankie. You just have a way of doing that, and I appreciate it because we're saying the same things. I just used
Yeah.
I guess I used a few more words in my explanation, but I appreciate that.
We're rowing in the same direction there. We're rowing in the same direction. You used another word in our earlier. You mentioned stagnation. This notion of stagnation. It seems like we can be active, we can be busy. We can say, oh, either, like we talked about when we had our last session with Kyle on the show. He was talking about that response that you have when you're in the rat race. Oh, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. I think I'm fine and I'm busy are cousins in the way that we use those two responses. So with that in mind, if there may be all this action and all this effort going out, what does stagnation look like?
Well, I think stagnation is a point in your life or a point in time when you're not moving forward. You're not really advancing in your career, in your relationship, just in your personal being. You're just kind of stuck in time. And I think that the stagnation I think stagnation is really a stopping point in your growth, right? Or a slowing down period in your growth. And I think that's what stagnation kind of means to me. You're stuck, you're stagnant, you're not moving forward, you're not advancing. You're just kind of, maybe think about it like, you're used to moving at a very high pace. There's always something going on. You always have something to do. You always have a project. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you're a couch potato, right? You're a couch potato for a long time, right? So I just use that analogy to just kind of frame a person who may be stagnant, and it could be, any other analogy you want to come up with, but the end result, I think, is someone who is just not moving forward, not engaged in their life and what's happening with them.
I would push back a little bit on some of that description that you offered there. I think that there's a scenario where someone is super busy. They've got all these projects going. They're always, pressed for time. They don't have a lot of free time to get stuff done. They're productive, they're active, all these different things. But I think they could, even though they have all that motion, all that activity, I think someone can still be stagnant, even though there's all of this perceived activity that's going on in their life. And I think that's the hook that catches us into fooling ourselves to ignore that feeling of stagnation. Because, if we think about it in the sense of work, it's feasible for us to be overworked but underutilized in the role that we're in, right? We could be overworked in terms of the amount of work that our employer gives us, the amount of things that we have to do, but yet while we're overworked, we're not fulfilled by what we're doing. We're in the rat race. We're not utilizing all of the muscles, all of the skills that we have to be able to bring to the table. And I don't think that just applies in the workspace. That can apply in relationships. That can apply in, any number of personal endeavors where we can have all this activity and all these things going on that are taking all this effort, but we're still not fulfilled. We're still, like you said, not moving forward and growing. Yet and still, we're just spinning our wheels, expending all of this energy. And for me, that kind of breaks down into an interesting dichotomy. One thing that sticks out to me, I've mentioned Dr. Goldratt before on this podcast. He made this comparison between effectiveness and efficiency. Both of those two things sound great, but I think what we do, we fool ourselves when we're looking at things from an efficiency standpoint, because efficiency means we're doing things right. That's what it means. Of all the stuff that we're doing, if we do it well, if we do the things that we're doing right, we're efficient. What we need to kind of get out of is stop fooling ourselves with efficiency and start focusing more on effectiveness. Effectiveness means we're doing the right things. And I think effectiveness is more valuable to us on our journey than is efficiency, because you can do things right, but they're not the correct things to be doing. But if we're effective, we're actually doing the right things to move us forward, to get us out of that rut. So that efficiency and effectiveness dichotomy, I think, is at play here when we're fooling ourselves. Because it's easy to fool yourself into thinking you're making progress when you're being efficient, but the effort that you're putting forth isn't very effective.
Yeah, and I think you're right with that. And I think what you described, or how I interpret some of what you said is that, being, I liken it to the phrase of being busy, right? You can be busy, you can be doing a lot, you can have a lot of motion, a lot of activity, a lot of movement, but you're not really accomplishing anything. You're just working, right? You're just moving in the same space, right? Nothing's really you're not really moving the ball forward, if you will. If you think about like a football analogy or something, you're not moving the ball forward. You're busy. There's a lot going on, but you're not really being productive in a forward motion, right?
Mhm.
And so I guess that's part of the description of stagnation that I was trying to get across, uh, but yeah, I mean, being effective is, I think we're kind of saying the same thing here, um, but um, yeah, I think just not being able to advance no matter what the situation is, um, you can end up in a very in a not a very, but you can end up in a stagnant state,
Mhm.
not moving forward, not advancing.
So, we've decided we want to stop fooling ourselves. We don't want to be stuck in this trap anymore of fooling ourselves. We've paused, we've kind of taken stock of where we are, done a little bit of self-evaluation as to where we may not be real with ourselves, where we may be hiding behind facades and masks, and not just being honest. So what do we need to do to start the shift to get, some forward momentum to stop fooling ourselves?
I think taking an inventory of a couple of things. Um, First, who do you really think you are? Who do you think you really want to be?
Mm.
And what things can you do? Identifying what things can you do that will position you to be that person that you desire to be. Because I think there's a gap sometimes between who we actually are and who we want to be,
Hmm.
and we only find that out if we sit and spend some time with ourselves and ask ourselves some questions about who we are and who we would like to be. So I think that that's really one of the first steps to getting to a point where you're not fooling yourself, is first identifying who you really are, or who you think you really are, and then identifying who or what you would really like to be. Um, I think that's the start.
Well, what you've described is it sounds like what you're describing is we need to create a kind of a backlog, or um, breaking the work down into some smaller steps of things that we can accomplish, creating a plan to bridge the gap between the current version and the future version that we're seeking. Is that, do we make like a 5-year plan to try to get us there? What time frames should we be shooting for?
I don't know that it's necessarily a time frame, because it's going to be different for everybody. Some people are going to have a smaller gap between who they are and who they would like to be. And so the time frame, I think, is a personal identification, because y- you may want to be somewhere in a year or two or three, but I think it's going to depend on those items that you list out that you need to take on, or you need to do to help you get to that person that you want to be. And it maybe that list some of the things on that list are not necessarily short term. Perhaps they are, but there could be things on there that you can do today or next week or by next month. So I think that I think it would be a work in progress. And I think once you get to the point where you say, well, yeah, I finally have gotten to be this person that I really want to be, and then you want to move into another state, and there's another list of things that you want to do. But I think that through all of that, there's probably some core items that will remain throughout the process. But honestly, I don't know that the timing of it is going to be the same for everybody.
Understood. This makes me reflect back on the journey that you and I have been on, with this podcast. We launched in August, but there was a lot of work happening prior to that. It was around the late March, early April timeframe when we first started having conversations around this podcast. And guess what? We had no idea. I think we may have been fooling ourselves back then as to what we were getting into, with the podcast. And through the things that we've tried, some things have worked, some things that haven't. I think we've been able to kind of whittle things down to figuring out what's real for our podcast. What are the viable, goals and objectives for us? Because, we may have done some foolish things in the beginning. Some people, they may think we're still doing foolish stuff now, but I tell you what, we're making progress and we're moving forward. And that comes through transition, experimentation, going out and doing, because guess what? We're not going to see any sort of change in that reflection in the mirror or whatever thing we're trying to do if we don't go do. We can't be passive.
Yeah, you're right. And, you talk about the podcast. I know when we started, leading up to the first recording, I know I was thinking, what in heaven's name are we doing here? Because I think I was pretty nervous about being on camera and recording and, putting myself out there for others to see and hear and, all that. But I don't think that I went into this with any illusion about what I wanted to accomplish or what I wanted this podcast to accomplish, with you and I, because it's something that I felt really good about doing. I was just uncertain, that unknown area, just it was just the unknown area. Like, what in the world are we doing? But as you mentioned, it turned out well. And so I think the bottom line for the podcast is that we've always tried to be authentic in this space. Whether it's, I know I've said to you, Frankie, I don't know if I like that episode because, XYZ or whatever. And you would say, no, Nuge, I think it was really good. And I go back and listen to it later on, after the edits and so forth. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good episode. So I don't think I had any illusions as to, why we wanted to create the space. And I think that it's been an authentic space for us. And I think that we, have really held each other up through the process. And I think that kind of goes back to that whole accountability and having someone that you can count on to, talk through things, work out things. And even when I'm talking about, deciding who you want to be or who you are and who you want to be, I think initially that has to be all you. You have to spend some time with yourself and figure some of those things out for yourself. But I don't think that it's a bad thing to have someone that you can talk through some of that with. I mean, there are people in my life that I know some of my strengths and some of my weaknesses, and can help me talk through some of that stuff. So I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think initially you have to be the one to make the decision about where you start and where you want to end up. That's all. It's got to be real. You got to be honest with yourself. You got to be authentic. You can't be fooling yourself about who you are, because deep down inside you're the only one that can determine that, and then take that information and grow.
And as we're in that shift, we create, we create this picture of where we want to go. And then when we start to ignite so that we can, stop fooling ourselves, be our more authentic self, that's where, we start to take action. That's where we start to get out and explore. And, what are some of the things that we can do to kind of grease the tracks, for lack of a better term, for us to get out there and start exploring new things, trying new stuff?
I think one of the first things is identifying what makes you feel
Hmm.
right. Because I heard someone say not too long ago that, it's not necessarily that thing that you want, like you want the new car, or you want the promotion, or you want, whatever. It's more about the feeling that you get when you have those things. And I found that to be very interesting, because we do chase after things,
Hmm.
but how often do we think about how we actually feel? And when I say actually feel, I mean the real, right?
Hmm.
The real, the authentic. How does that make you feel? And so I think that we need to we could determine what things make us feel good and start there. So, for instance, if I know that getting outside in the sun, a few days a week and just, taking a walk or riding a bicycle, if that really makes me feel good, if that gives me some joy, I think those are the places that we need to start. Because I think once we have a good base, once we feel good about um, ourselves, things that make us, happy and feel good, I think that we can catapult to a myriad of other areas in our life. But I think first we got to have some reason to uh, go to those next steps about where we want to be or who we want to be. Because I think it's gotta also be, how are we gonna feel when we get there?
Yeah. It, again, putting it back in the reference of a professional capacity. Um, I've had friends who have gone through this where they're in a work situation that's, not the best. And, they're thinking about leaving. And when they speak with their managers about that, the manager's like, oh, no, 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 we can, we'll give you more money. And, the more money's nice for a short period of time. But
Mm,
then all those things that were making you feel the way you were feeling in that space start mounting back up again. And guess what?
mhm.
And that money is not a lasting a lasting balm to keep that itch or that pain from coming back up in your space. I'm definitely feeling what you're saying about feelings over things.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too when you talk about, the money aspect of it, because, I mean, money is just such a big part of everything that we do in life. And, if you are in a position where that extra whatever it is makes a big difference in, what's happening in your world today versus what's happening in your world, after you get that large amount of money or what have you. I think that that's a decision maker for a lot of people. I don't
Hmm.
think it's easy to walk away from that to satisfy, how you feel, because it's baby needs shoes and we need, to keep the water and the lights and the gas on in the house. I mean, that's a decision maker.
For sure.
And so it's really unfortunate, because I think that's part too of how people end up in stagnant situations, how they end up not being true to themselves, or fooling themselves, because that money carrot is a huge motivator. And it's really unfortunate. I think that it kind of binds people in a situation that they might not ordinarily choose if they were searching for something, or if they were looking to be in a situation that truly gave them, joy and fulfillment.
Absolutely. That fulfillment is key. So as we get ready to wrap up, Nuge, what do you want to leave our listeners with in terms of how they can stop fooling themselves? What do we need to be doing?
Well, I would just challenge our audience to, find some quiet time, get your journal out, or just, a notebook, a piece of paper, something. and sit down and take an inventory of what you really believe, what you really feel is the real you. List some things out, right? Who are you? Well, I'm a person that likes to walk 2 miles a day in the sun. I'm a person who likes to go fishing on the weekends. I'm a person who likes to ride my motorcycle. I'm a person who likes to, whatever it is, right? Write down those things and make sure you put some feeling behind them. How do those things make you feel? So you can truly identify who you are. And then identify the person that you would like to be, and then identify those things that you need to do or you think you need to do to become that person. And then start working on those items to help you move in that direction to who you really want to be. And I think above all, and I'm guilty of this from years gone by, I'm very guilty of this, but do things that bring you joy. And I don't think we think enough about that. I mean, we get to live this life for once, right? There's no do-overs, there's no mulligans, as they say. Do those things that bring you joy.
Well said.
That's my 2 cents.
I'm with it. And I think there's a challenge for us in there too, is that should we cross paths with any of our listeners, I want our listeners to call us to the carpet or hold us accountable to make sure that the people that we seem to be on this podcast are the people that we are in real life. I think that's a good accountability step for us too, because we can't be fooling ourselves and trying to put something out on this podcast that's not really who we are. And I don't think that we do. I think I'm pretty confident to tell our listeners, if you see us on the street, that the same people you're seeing on this podcast and hearing on this podcast, that's the same Neug and Franky you're going to see in Walmart, in Target, at the store, or whatever.
Absolutely, same. Good stuff. And thanks for putting that challenge out there for our audience to hold us accountable to. I really appreciate that. So we are definitely wrapping up right now. I think I've enjoyed this conversation. Of course, I enjoy all of our conversations, Franky. I really appreciate you being here with us, and I appreciate our audience. Indeed, I appreciate our audience for being here week after week after week. Our listenership is growing, and so I really appreciate that. And with that in mind, Franky, please tell the people where they can find us.
So for all things PSI Effect podcast related, you can find it on our website. This is psipod.com. There you can find a link to all of our episodes, all the different platforms where you can get the audio version of our podcast, and you can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find us on YouTube for the full video versions of the podcast. You can search for the PSI Effect podcast or use our handle at This Is PSI Pod, which is also our handle on social media at This Is PSI Pod for Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Come on out there and find us. We'd love to see you.
Thanks for that, Franky. Listen, everybody, again, thanks for being here. We really appreciate you. Come on back and keep listening. So just remember that setbacks are temporary and comebacks are legendary. And until next time, be brave and rise on purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the PSI Effect podcast. This show doesn't happen without you, and you can connect with us via Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit our website at thisispsipod.com and find us on YouTube and social media at This Is PSI Pod. That's at This Is PSI Pod. Until next time, remember, be brave and rise on purpose.